Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Great. As we wait for the presentation to come up, I can start by introducing myself. My name is Miri Mwangi. I work with the Argidius Foundation as a program manager. For those who are here early in the morning, I work with Nicholas, who's here with us, and I manage the work in East Africa. So that's who I am. I am very excited to be here. And very excited about scale and how organizations here in Ghana are using scale and using those thoughts about scale. So I'm equal parts excited and anxious and nervous for this workshop. But I'm sure it's going to go well. So this is what we're going to do. So I'm going to ask you a question. And if your answer is yes to that question, and it's basically a statement. So I'll make a statement. If for you that statement is true for your organization, and it's on a system. So no one is going to verify, so on a system. So thinking about your organization, if this is true for you, I want you to take 2 steps forward. Yeah? We've understood what I mean by that. So if the statement that I make right now is true for your organization, take 2 steps forward. Okay, so the first question. We can describe our target client down to their average annual revenue, the type of business they run, the sector or industry, the age and stage of their growth, and the potential for growth for that business. If that is true for you, take 2 steps forward. All right. Oh. All right, question number 2. Okay, the entrepreneurs that we work with pay a fee to access our program or services. Take 2 steps forward. Okay. Okay. Let's see, there are some people who haven't moved. There's nothing wrong with that, by the way. There's nothing wrong with that. So my third question, my third statement, the first thing we do with the entrepreneurs we work with is a needs assessment to identify their specific challenges at that point in time. Take 2 steps forward. There you go. Excellent. Okay. Take 2 steps forward if you we collect data on the performance of the businesses we support. So performance being how the business is growing. Okay. Then the next one is take 2 steps forward if this is true for you. We use the data that we collect to make improvements in the program. Okay. Okay. Then this is the next statement. We have, okay, let me see how I want to ask this. Maybe let me simplify, let me just use one question for this. So we have a board of directors. Take 2 steps forward. Not advisors, board of directors. Okay. And on our board, we have non-executives. So we have people who are not part of the management team on our board. 2 steps forward. All right. Then last question. Let me see if I want to ask this. Last question. If I know right now what the burn rate of my organization is, like how much money we need to run our programs every month, like right now, off the top of my head. Okay. It depends. Okay. Great. So that is our mini diagnostic for the day. Great. So from the responses that I've just gotten, it sounds like you all have an understanding of what scale is, and I'm not going to go into how we arrived at scale because that's Nicholas talked about that in the morning. And how it began for us was really a set of good practices that we identified for high-performing entrepreneur support organizations. So the fact that no one was left at the wall means that each of you is doing something well, and each of you has implemented some element of skill. The fact that no one was standing right here with me means that none of us can do everything perfectly, or none of us have implemented every element of skill perfectly. Yeah? So we'll get started. So I'll start with just like a brief introduction of scale for the ones who have seen the report on our website, or you've had a look at it as you're doing the diagnostic. This will be familiar, but for those who haven't, yeah, I'll just try to start from the beginning and take us as quickly as we can. So. The reason why this is important for Argidius, and the reason why we started on this learning journey, was our interest was really in creating more formal jobs. And formal jobs tend to be full-time jobs, and they're typically salaried. And these are a good indicator of somebody who's not living in poverty, because they have a stable income that is paying a living wage. So that's Argidius's interest in supporting ESOs that work with SMEs. And the way we think about SMEs is we segment SMEs based on their growth characteristics. So in their first question, which was actually around the S of scale, so the selection, one of the items that I listed was, do you have a sense of the growth trajectory of the businesses that you support? So if it's a necessity-based micro-enterprise, formalizing business, dynamic or venture, these are categories that speak to the growth potential of those businesses and typically the typical growth trajectory for those businesses. So just to quickly try and define these three, necessity-based businesses tend to be micro-enterprises that are started to create a livelihood for the entrepreneur and maybe his family. Typically, these businesses are not employing anybody outside of the family. These businesses could be larger or have the ambition to grow and have the ambition to grow outside of the family, so to create jobs for people outside the family, and they have the ambition to become more formal and therefore create more formal jobs. And formality can be even identified in the structures of the business. From where I come from, this is the difference between a fruit vendor at the side of the road who's working in an informal physical structure and one who has set up like a shop, and they have the intention of growing that business. In a formal structure, they have licenses, etc. So they're also visible to government, they're paying taxes, that type of thing. So that's a formalizing business. But typically this also tends to be a micro-enterprise, so in terms of their revenue and their growth trajectory, it also tends to be slower. A dynamic business, I'll give you in the Kenyan example, in the Kenyan context, and then I'm sure you can identify what that looks like for you in Ghana. A dynamic business tends to be a business that employs a traditional business model, a proven business model. They tend to be in what we'd call like bread and butter industries. So if you're talking about agriculture, it's an agro-processing facility, it's a restaurant. If you're talking about education, it's a school, for example. If you're talking about healthcare, it's a hospital or a health facility or a pharmaceutical business. So it tends to be in a traditional sector employing traditional business models, and the growth trajectory tends to be medium to low. So they're not the ones that are growing 10x in 3 years. But they're growing steadily, and they're growing steadily over time. Typically, they tend to seek out business development services at the point in their growth when now they've identified an opportunity that will allow them to grow faster, or typically, and we see this a lot in Kenya as well, when the next generation is taking over the business. So they want to professionalize and they want to allow this business to achieve its potential, so they seek out business development services. So that's a dynamic business. A venture, the way we think about it, tends to be a business with high growth potential. The growth trajectory is very high, so this is the ones where you expect the hockey stick growth. And that growth is typically fueled by technology, because technology allows that business to scale very quickly. So these are the ones where the expectation is you're going to see that 3, 4, 5, 10x growth. And in Kenya, they're the ones that are looking to raise $1 million and take over the continent. So that's what we'd call a high growth venture. So these businesses have very different needs. And they all have they all have the same stages of growth. So there's what that business looks like at the idea stage, in the early stage when they're just starting to enter the market, when they have maybe their post-revenue, but they're not exactly making profit just yet, they're testing the market. There's what they look like when now they've established the market, established the product, and now they're ready to grow. So growth looks different for all of them. And some of them will get to the point where they'll mature. So that's how we think about SMEs. So this segmentation is based on their characteristics as opposed to revenue, etc., because that will vary depending on the stage, for example, and it will also vary by country. I think one of the speakers in the morning made that point. So a unicorn in Ghana is not going to look like Apple, for example. So that will vary. So that's how we think about them. And when we think about the different types of interventions, and this is a mix of the interventions that Argidius supports, we have those that work with businesses in cohorts. So it's that whole family of accelerators, incubators, business plan competitions, and typically one common characteristic of that segment of interventions is that they tend to work with businesses in cohorts, even though they're not necessarily working with them in cohorts all the time. There could be some one-on-one interaction, but they tend to recruit them in cohorts. And the other kind of defining characteristic is that these programs tend to focus on the whole business. So they're focusing on the business model as opposed to one element of the business. And they're usually working with the founder or the entrepreneur or the founding team. So those are some defining characteristics of those types of interventions. Then we have another set of interventions which we broadly call organizational development, and these ones will tend to focus on a subset of the business. So, and the ones listed here, so management training, so it's training like the middle managers within the organization or specifically one functional area of the business. There are those that are providing very technical assistance. So let's say they're working with food processors to help them improve their processes or their quality, so it's something very technical, or they're providing consulting for one area of the business or another, mentoring, coaching, focusing on specific individuals in the organization or executive coaching. They're providing like a specific talent intervention or human resource intervention, and we also have lots of networks as well, including the ESO forum would kind of fall under that. Then we have those that have an access to finance component. So we do have incubators, accelerators that have an access to finance component, and for us the way we think about that is interventions that have access to finance and improving access to finance for SMEs as a core element or a core outcome for their intervention. So for them, success looks like this business we are working with has now been able to access finance, whatever that finance looks like. And that this could be helping connect them with finance outside of the organization or providing finance from within the organization. But access to finance is a core outcome for them, so it's one of their critical success factors. Then we also work with lots of platforms, and we do lots of research as well. But those three big buckets would be how we typically think about business development service interventions or ESOs. So our reason for working with all these different types of intervention is to improve the effectiveness of all of these interventions, whether it's mentoring or it's acceleration or it's management training or it's an access to finance intervention. Our goal working with each partner is to help them improve the effectiveness of what it is they do, and once we've improved that effectiveness, help them to scale so that they're able to reach more SMEs, and more SMEs have access to that kind of quality growth. So that's really why Argidius exists. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this. This is what Nicholas was talking about earlier today. So it's actually it's been 10 years now plus. We have been collecting data on over 12,000 entrepreneurs, and including, other than the ones that are supported by our partners, we've also participated in a few large research projects. There was one called the Global Accelerator Learning Initiative that Andy was also a part of. That also looked at a very big data set of enterprise data. and looking at 3 critical data points, we were able to identify trends. So there are some ESOs that were working with enterprises, and we were seeing these enterprises increase their revenues, create more formal jobs, and have better access to finance. And we wanted to dig into that and see, okay, so why is that happening? So are they just picking the winners? Picking people who are going to win is actually a good thing, because you want to invest in the ones that have the highest potential for growth and job creation. So, and what is it about those programs that was driving the growth that we were seeing? So we evaluated them as well. There were external evaluations that tried to get to the contribution question. So the data will tell us you're working with organizations, with businesses that grow. So the evaluation will tell us to what extent have you contributed to this growth as a program or as an ESO. So that's kind of how we arrived at scale. And for us, the 3 data points, and I'll speak to this a little bit later, were critical because, one, it allowed us to collect that data across the portfolio. So, and it's the same for each, whether you're working with an early stage business, idea stage, so we're collecting the same data points, regardless of industry and the nature of that business. So it allowed us to have some pretty uniform data that we could compare. So you're kind of comparing apples to apples in that sense. And the first of these characteristics that we identified after we've looked at the data, it's been analyzed, we've looked at the evaluations, we've had multiple conversations, we funded some other research studies that look at specific management practices and the impact of those management practices on business performance. So after we've looked at all of that, that's when we arrived at scale. So the first element of scale is selection. The first question I asked you when we were doing our little exercise was, are you able to describe the type of business that you're working with to the point where you know exactly what this business, your target business, looks like, you know where they are, their stage of growth, because if you're able to do that, then you're able to create a program that helps them for exactly where they are. There are lots of programs, and I'm sure this is not unfamiliar to you, where if you have a business that has been around for 10 years, and they're in the same program with a business that has just started, chances are some of what you're covering will benefit one but not the other. And because many ESOs tend to work with businesses in cohorts, so there's some uniformity in the kind of intervention that you're delivering. So there's like group training, there's some group work that you're doing. You want to make sure that the group is as homogeneous as possible. And for you to get there, you must be really clear about who you're actually selecting into the program and who actually gets into the program. And so to make sure that it's valuable for everyone. So select the enterprise, select for the enterprise, but at the same time select for the entrepreneur as well. And in which instances do you select for the entrepreneur? In which instance is selecting for the entrepreneur like the most important thing? At what stage of business? Anyone want to shout it out? At the idea stage. So somebody can write an excellent business plan or an excellent idea for a business, but if there's nothing to see in terms of that business other than what's on paper, you're actually selecting not just for the idea, but for the entrepreneur. So you're selecting for the person who's actually going to get this thing on the road. And selecting for the entrepreneur is also important because even in the later stages of the business, because most businesses don't fail because the idea wasn't great. They fail because the people who are at the helm are stopped being the right people to continue running that business going forward. So a business gets to the point where you need certain competencies that maybe the founder doesn't necessarily have. So you're selecting for the entrepreneur. At a certain stage, you're selecting for the team as well, for like bigger businesses. Another thing that we found improves selection, because sometimes it's difficult to kind of identify, especially when you're working with businesses at the earlier stage, it's difficult to identify like all the different elements that will help you really define the persona of the entrepreneur that you're looking for. Having a multi-stage program can be also an avenue for selection. So what does that typically look like? So that looks like a program where you give a certain level of support in the first stage to, let's say, 100 businesses. Then of the 100, you have worked with them for a while, you've invested something into these businesses in terms of content, in terms of support. Then from that interaction, you can actually start to identify for the which entrepreneurs have the most commitment, which ones have the most grit, which ones are more likely to succeed if you invest more in them. And in the second stage of the program, you may decide to select maybe 20 of the 100, and these are the ones that you put more into. And that does two things. One, it helps you get to know the entrepreneur without investing too much in them. And two, it helps you invest more in the ones who have the most potential for growth. So that's the value of having like a multi-stage program. So I want to ask you a question. So within your table, I'm sure you have somebody sitting next to you or around the table who knows your organization well. Right? Who can say that? At least there's someone at your table who knows your organization. Are you all strangers to each other? Okay. Because if that's the case, that's... Oh, it's relative. Okay. There's someone at your table who at least knows this is your organization and this is what you do. Basic. There's at least someone. Okay. There are some who might be strangers to each other. So I want you, and where are my table facilitators, just so that I see how you're spread out? The table facilitators that I met before lunch, who signed up for the ESO program with Impact Investing Ghana. Okay, there are some tables that might not have somebody, but this is what I want you to do. So I want you to ask the person at your table who at least knows of your organization to describe who your target client is. Just 1 minute, and then you'll tell me what you actually had. So the question is, ask somebody at your table who at least has heard of your organization, who is your target client. Just ask them. 1 minute, then I'll bring us back. So if your selection criteria is really clear, not only will the SMEs or the entrepreneurs that you're looking for know that or get that from the application materials, but you'll also be able to get better referrals. So, and this is not, because the last time I asked this question, the assumption was that this was a question around how well are you marketing your program, do other people know your program? But in this room, this is a room of peers. From the answers that I've gotten, it sounds like there's some similarity to the types of entrepreneurs that you're targeting, but there are also some differences. So it's good to know what the similarities are, but it is especially important to know where the differences are. So who will apply to your program that is not a good fit for your program, and do you know where to send them? And you'll only know where to send them when you understand what other people in the ecosystem are doing. So I'd really encourage the ESO forum to try and make sure that becomes something that's common in the ecosystem. That you understand your similarities, but you especially understand the differences in your target audience. The next question, which I also asked when we started, was how many of you are charging for your programs? So charging does two things. So there's an example that Nicholas gave earlier where charging not only improved selection, but it also improved the financial position of this organization. But the real purpose of charging is to change the nature of the relationship. So for a long time, business development services, especially strategic business development services, and I'll make that distinction in a moment, has been positioned as charity. So whenever we talk about charging, there are two questions that come up. There is willingness to pay and ability to pay. So the first must come before the second. So the first one is always around willingness to pay. And the reality of the nature of strategic business development services and how they've been offered. And strategic business development services are defined as business development services that are designed to improve the performance and competitiveness of a business. Operational business development services usually target a functional area of the business. So it's audit or accounting or marketing. So for those, the willingness to pay is not usually a question because it is customary and understood that you will pay for these services. So I've never met a business that questioned why they need to pay the auditor if they needed an audit done. But I have met lots of businesses that don't understand why they need to pay for business development services, like going through an accelerator, receiving technical assistance, even when the value of that technical assistance impacts every facet of their business. So it's never really a question of, the first question is never about the ability, it's always around the willingness. And the willingness has everything to do with the way BDS has been positioned, and it's typically been positioned as charity. When you start charging, that starts to change the nature of that relationship. So I stop as your client, and I keep on using your entrepreneur client to, again, try and drill this in. When you charge, you change the relationship from I am your beneficiary to I am your client. Now, if I use an example from, let's say you came and visited me in my home, and you asked me for a glass of water, let's say. And I'm not charging you for the glass of water, so it's free. So I gave you some water, you drank, you're happy. If I decided to charge you for that glass of water, you will want to know, what is the temperature of this water? Is that glass clean? Is it like a nice glass? Or why are you serving me with a small glass and you're wanting me to pay for it? So my perception of what is valuable changes when I have to pay for it. And that is why charging is so important. And that's how we are going to move the needle around the willingness to pay question, creating a value-based relationship. Another way I have seen charging change the way an entrepreneur responds to a program is in the quality of the feedback that they receive. So we had a partner who we met with some of the businesses that they work with just to understand, the program. And when we met the entrepreneurs, the business was charging something very small. And one of the businesses that had gone through the program was a family-run business. So like a couple was running the business. So it was the wife who started the business, and then the husband left employment and joined them a few years later. And the wife said, okay, if we are going to be on the same page on this business, you also need to go through that program because it was very valuable for us so that we can be on the same page. At the point in time when the husband did the program, they had doubled the price for the program. So, but the lady for some reason did not know this. So when she's telling us about the value of the program, she told us, what she learned and how she applied the practices that she learned through the program into her business and the changes that resulted into. That was great. And then her husband said, yeah, and okay, the program costs X amount. And she was, what do you mean? You paid that much. So what did you actually get from the program? So that's when she now started asking questions. You missed a few sessions because I was with you. So what happened? So now she starts to demand more because now she's seen what they're actually paying for it. The quality of the feedback that you get, using the simple example of, you pay for water versus you get it for free is different. Because you've drank the water, you're satisfied, but when you're paying for it, you want to demand more, you want to demand better quality. And that feedback is vital to improve the quality of your program. So that's when you'll start to see the difference between what your entrepreneurs want and what they need. And the program kind of needs to address both. So you have to give some of what the entrepreneur wants, which may not necessarily be what they need, but you have to do both. So a good example of that is we have, from one of our partners, is they will have a business come through the program, and the first thing that the business will ask for is, I just want a nicer website, because they think that will solve a particular problem for them. So they will take them through, financial management and all these things, but if they don't help them get a better website, but I'm not satisfied, that is not what I wanted. As much as they will still see growth in the business much, much later on. And you need satisfied customers for them to refer other clients to you. So the satisfaction is important, but it's not necessarily a proxy for effectiveness. So I could be satisfied with the service that you offered me, but that doesn't mean that what I got has actually led to improvements in my business and has led to growth. A very common type of program at least in East Africa, is we will have an incubator or an accelerator that runs something that looks like a mini MBA. So in that one program, maybe it's a couple of months, or there's one that's actually about 16 weeks, an entrepreneur will go through everything that they need to know to run that business. So if you are somebody who's looking for that information, you're running a business, you don't quite know where to start because you don't have a business degree or you've never run a business before, that's really useful information. So you'll be very satisfied at the end of that program, But if in your business, the real challenge you are having was around cash flow, what has really unlocked value for you is that session you did on cash flow, not everything else that you've learned. So that knowing the difference between, and trying to strike this balance between ensuring that your entrepreneur clients are satisfied because they are clients, and at the same time that what you're offering them is effective, is a really interesting balancing act. Now for this particular program, if they just took that 16-week program and started with a diagnostic where they identify, okay, for you, your business, this is actually the problem, so let's start there. And they're able to unlock growth or to unlock a barrier for this particular business, then that business can actually grow even as this person is learning. And that will be a lot cheaper than a 16-week program. So yeah, just something to say about charging. Another key question around charging is, what is the right price point? So once we've addressed the willingness question, there is the ability question. If a business is an entrepreneur is in the idea stage, they obviously don't have cash flow at that point in time. So how can you ensure that they're contributing enough to that program, whether that's in the form of their time, for example, for the youth-run businesses. And as it happens, I don't know if it's the same in this part of the world, where in East Africa, a lot of, especially youth entrepreneurship programs, programs that are targeting micro-enterprises, will pay people to attend the program. Now that creates a very perverse incentive for attending the programs. The thought behind it makes sense because this person is taking time away from their business, but it creates a very perverse incentive for actually attending business training or participating in programs. So you want to make sure that they're committing something. So if it's substituting the fact that they can't pay with the fact that they show up every day, then they're paying with their time. At least at the idea stage. And how you enforce that is, for example, if you miss a certain number of sessions, then you cannot continue to participate in the program because you're taking up resources somebody else who's more committed could be taking up. So there are different ways to think about it. For some of our other partners, maybe who work with, if we go back to the segmentation that we talked about earlier, like the high growth ventures, it's a program where access to finance is a key outcome for the program. It's asking a question like, what are the cash events for this business? If this is a business where they are most likely to raise, based on the growth trajectory, the type of funding that's available for this type of business, we are talking about targeting a venture capital fund to invest in this business, or an angel, you can tie the payment to that cash event. So it's tied to the business, the cash flows of the business. We have another partner who we are having a similar conversation with them, and most of their businesses tend to be dynamic, and quite a few of them are actually in the, I don't know what's a similar type of business in Ghana, but in Kenya, and it's actually a business in a program in Uganda. This idea of bulking grain is actually a very big business. So it's this idea of aggregating, so different smallholder farmers are producing maize, for example, and then you have a business whose job it is to kind of go and buy grain from each of these businesses and sell to a miller, for example. So that idea of bulking grain is a really good business, but it's also a very low margin business. So if you are charging, depending if that's the bulk of your portfolio or the bulk of the kind of clients that you have, you also need to factor in, are they in a high margin business or a low margin business? If it's consulting, it tends to be high margin. So what you charge and how you do it will be different. So for those types of businesses, they're thought about testing, what do you call it? They thought about testing revenue. Well, it's not revenue share. They thought about testing revenue share actually, but that would not have worked because this business has such low margins that taking 1% of their revenue is significant. It's like basically taking half of their returns. So that would not have worked for that type of business. If it was majority businesses in consulting, high margin, then 1% revenue is not a significant portion of that business's actual return. So they had to think about some of those questions. So when you're thinking about like what is the right price point, it's the stage of the business, what is enough for them to actually see that this is something that they're giving value to and they need to get value from. So what is that point? If it's time for an idea stage business, if it's a certain amount of money, how much is that money? So it really depends on the type of business. Those are some of the things you need to consider. So Another question that I wanted to ask you because a good number of you took a step forward when I asked how many of you are charging for your programs. How many of you have tested more than one way of charging your entrepreneurs? So other than just saying the fee is 30 CD and that's what it is, how many of you have tested more than one way? Yeah, at least one or two hands here. Would someone like to share what they've actually tested and what were the results? Someone has volunteered you.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, so my name is Simeon from Developers Academy. So before COVID, we realized that entrepreneurs in our ecosystem don't have their businesses formalized. And due to that, it was difficult for them to get any support from the government. So we started an incubator and realized that within a space of two weeks, we have moved from 4 people to 35. And the other district close to us was calling for same. So we decided to inculcate a fee, which was initially not a plan for the whole incubator. And they were willing to pay because at the end of the day, we will facilitate the process for their businesses to get formalized. So they saw the need to go to the program and not just receiving knowledge, but at the end of the day, their businesses are being formalized. So we charge a fee of $250, and that was in early 2020. And before the lockdown in March, early March, we have moved from 35 to 140. Okay, and they were all paying us 250 Ghana cedis. Now, when we return from the lockdown, we have moved from the 140 to 270. And they were all paying. But this is the issue. There were some of them who were not having the time to come to our space. So we developed a virtual section and then reduced the price. And because it was convenient for most of them, and for them it was cost effective, we had a lot of people joining again through the virtual. And to us, that was a great starting point for us. That was the first incubator we launched, and we're able to charge since 2020, and that have continued till now. Thank you.
That's a great example. The key is experimentation, experimentation, experimentation. There is no like one solution around charging. There is no formula anybody has. But you need to experiment based on who your client is and what their circumstances are in terms of age, stage, like where are your clients. But the goal is to experiment. I think of all the practices, this is probably the one that we get the most resistance, even within our own portfolio. But the minute someone tries it, the minute an organization tries it, it changes everything. So it's what I can encourage you is experiment. Try different models. Try even, you see, for them, it even allowed them to identify a new segment that they could serve and a new way of delivering their program. And they were still getting value and the client was getting value. So experiment with charging. Now, the goal of charging is not to necessarily cover the entire cost of the program. If you're working with later stage businesses, that's probably possible. It's a viable goal. But for most of the other stages, it's not always a viable goal that you're going to cover all the costs. And this idea that there is anywhere in the world where business development services is not subsidized is not based on reality. Because anywhere in the world, including the global north, a lot of BDS is subsidized by taxpayers, and it's also subsidized by donors in some instances. So the goal is not necessarily I'm going to cover all my costs, although in some instances that is a viable goal. So the next practice, and we are coming to the last two now, is addressing problems. So one of the questions that I asked at the beginning was, does your program start with needs assessment? Is that more or less the first thing that you do? The importance of making that one of the first things that you do is that it allows you to identify what should be the priority for this particular business. Even when you're working with businesses in cohorts, they may not necessarily come to the program with the same problems or with the same barriers to growth or with the same opportunities. So being able to identify what will unlock growth for this business can also help you make improvements to the program. And it will help you unlock value for that business very quickly. One of the really effective tools that is also, I guess, one of the most underutilized for a lot of especially cohort-based programs is the ability to learn from one another. Even as you're doing that diagnostic needs assessment, you can call it very many different ways, but it's basically this principle of identifying the problems that that business has at that particular point in time when they're entering the program and making that a priority to solve that and coming up with some time-bound goals around that. Is peer-to-peer. Like usually in that group, my one big problem might be I want to enter the export market. Chances are in that cohort, there's somebody who has solved that problem because they're already exporting. And it might be, I want to export to Nigeria. So there might be somebody in that cohort who's already doing that, and doing this diagnostic at the beginning or the needs assessment at the beginning can help you make those connections. And people being able to learn from one another. We've also evaluated a program of an ESO program actually in Uganda that we supported, where this was the most valuable element of the program. So they loved the training, but they especially loved being able to learn from one another because they were able to solve each other's problems real time. And the solution sometimes comes from, you're having a problem with that agency, here is a contact. That only happens when you create space in the program and dedicated space for the entrepreneurs to interact, so peer-to-peer. So it's not all like training, you're coming at 8 and you're leaving at 4 and it's just all training and you've not had a chance to talk to one another. So that's just something to think about. And we'll do a little bit more of this in the group work. Learning, so in this sector we collect a lot of data. I am yet to encounter an ESO that does not collect some data. The data that we collect, there are many different ways for doing it. So for Argidius, for example, if I start with us, the reason why we collected revenue, job creation, so collecting then the number of full-time and part-time jobs being created and access to finance, is because those metrics help us know certain things about a program. So we chose revenue, for example, because if we had chosen profit, so one of the examples I've just given earlier is people who are doing in Kenya grain bulking, in East Africa grain bulking, very low margin business. So they could be growing rapidly, but their profits are going to be very small. Somebody who's in consulting might have like one client and their profits could be humongous, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're growing. It's just that one client. If that client goes away, that's it. So revenue is relatively easy to get to because it's sales, it's turnover, it's how much are you selling like month on month, what does that look like at the end of the year. So it's relatively easy to get to, and it's something it's easy to collect uniformly regardless of sector and etc. And it will give you a picture of growth or lack thereof. But that met our objective. So there is what we wanted to know, and we identified a metric that helps us know that. So you also need to identify what metrics help you know whether what you're doing is working. So, and in some instances, especially if you're talking about businesses, it's great that we are collecting revenue data at the very least, because that's very common. But the reality is, even if you are collecting revenue data, that doesn't necessarily tell you if that business is a going concern within the next 12 months. If you're collecting data on profit, one, can be manipulated in very many different ways, and an organization could make losses for years, but they'll run out of cash. One of my teachers put it really well. She said, Mary, you can make losses year on year for 10 years, but you only need to run out of cash once. So maybe for your businesses, the more important metric is not just revenue or profit, it's actually free cash flow. Because your business could be telling you they're growing in revenue, but the expenses are out of control. How do you know that? So that you can know how to help them. Or they could be telling you they're making profits, and then one day you just hear they're insolvent because they ran out of money. They're not managing their cash flow well. So keeping track of the metrics that help you know what you need to know to support this business are really important. So for us, revenue was the one. For you, it might not necessarily be the one. You might also be tracking, for example, your program is designed to help to make certain improvements in the business. So you need metrics that tell you what you need to know. Not necessarily the metrics that the funder is looking for, or that help you have a good impact report. So the goal and the question that I normally ask partners is, okay, so this is what you're doing. How do you know that it works? So for you to know that it works, there are certain metrics that you need to track that will be evidence for this thing is working. So those are the metrics you need to be tracking. So thinking a little bit more critically about that would be really helpful. And it's also important that that culture is built into the organization. So it's not about collecting data. Yes, you collect data for accountability, to your funders, to your organization. You need to collect this data, but you're also collecting this data to enable you to improve the program. So that kind of turns that into a learning question as opposed to just a data collection question. So, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in the tables, but this is one of the critical ones. We met an organization recently where their monitoring and evaluation team is actually called institutional learning. So the fact that that's what they call it already tells me how they use their data. So it's really more, the core is actually around the learning. What are you learning from this data as opposed to how much data are you collecting? Another reason why we chose to collect revenue data for Argidius, so I'll use Argidius as an example, but this will be different for you. We used revenue because revenue helps us to see if this business is growing. A lot of these programs that we are supporting and a lot of the programs that you're working on, there are certain changes that are happening in the business. So there is, they're learning more, so they know things that they did not know before. What they're learning, they're implementing into the business. But for you to get to the actual changes in revenue, you need to collect that data over a longer period of time. So not just at the end of the program, like a satisfaction survey, or did you like the program? Did you learn something? That's great, but that tells you about changes that they might be making in their behavior, in their management practices, but it doesn't tell you the impact of those changes on the performance of the business. And that's what you really need to get to. And to what extent are those changes that we are seeing, how has your program contributed to them? Now that's the story that you need to tell about the value of your program. So that's learning. And then on the leading by example, we can probably spend 3 days on this one. Because, and I liked what the speaker in the morning said, when he asked that question about how many of us in the room have actually been to a training in the last year, have been trained on something, received some kind of capacity building. Because as ESOs, we are also growing organizations. So we have the same, more or less the same challenges as the businesses that we're trying to support. So it's really important that we are thinking about, our product. Is it priced correctly? Our team, do we have the right people in place? How many of us understand the competencies that you need on your team to be able to serve your entrepreneurs better? Are we thinking about our impact management? Do we have good governance in place? Do we have good financial management? Do we have diverse sources of income? One of the questions that I asked was around, if I asked you right now, do you know what the burn rate of your organization is? You will be surprised how difficult it is to get to that number in some instances. We've worked with organizations where today we have a very good conversation about all the excellent impact they're having. The next day they're telling us, oh, by the way, we are about to become insolvent. So that also happens. So you need to lead by example. The same things that you're telling your businesses, practice what you preach. The same way these businesses have reached out to you to seek support to improve their own performance, you also need to seek support to improve your performance. So that's really important. So that's scale for us in a nutshell. Where are my table facilitators again, just so that I get a sense of, just show of hands. If there are more than 2 at a table, oh, those are the only table facilitators we have. Let's see. Okay, stand. It might be easier for you to stand. You might be stretching. The table facilitators. Okay, okay. We might have lost a couple at lunch. Yeah. Oh, there are those, Mohammed, who the table facilitators had applied for something. Yeah. Yeah, the people we met before lunch. Those are the ones. Okay. All right. So we might need to appoint some just now, but that's fine. So I want us to go into a bit of a discussion in our tables. And on your tables, you'll find some discussion questions for each group that go into each element of scale. So, yeah, that have a facilitator. Actually, I want every table to have about 7 people. So the table facilitators keep standing so that I can see. There are none on this, or there's only one on this side. Amma, you might need to help me to identify some people because like this table is full, there's nobody. Okay. So Amma and Mohammed will help me identify a couple more that can support us. So if you're sitting at a table where you are less than 5, move to a table with an empty chair where there are more than 5, where there are more than 4. So there is Richard's table at the end there. You might need to join with another table. Which other? The table at the end here might need to join. 4 spots here. Might need to merge some people. Move with your facilitator there. Okay. Okay, thank you. That is, yeah, now that looks more like it. Okay, has everyone found a spot? And every table has a facilitator? Which table doesn't have a facilitator? Everyone has. Okay, okay. And which table doesn't have this sheet of paper? Is there, every table has? You have this sheet of paper that says Ghana ESO Forum 20,000. Okay, scale workshop at Ghana ESO Forum. Everyone has that? Or there's a table there without? Okay. So great. So that was for the table facilitator. So who are the table facilitators? Let me see by a show of hands. Show of hands that I see. Oh, here you have 2. Is there a table without a table facilitator? Every table has. This table, who's the facilitator? There you go. That table, you have 1. So every table has. Okay, that's great. So you guys are just doubly blessed. That's fine. Okay, so Yeah, the ones who are joining us can just settle into a group. So each table has this sheet of paper, and then you also have some flip chart sheets on your table. A marker, Sharpie, yeah. Every table has a Sharpie on the table. If you don't, just let me know. Mohammed will sort you out quickly. Every table has flip chart. Oh, there, they need a pen there. Every other table has a pen. Okay, great. Great. So we are going to be discussing the different elements of scale at the table. Each table, you can start with a quick round of introductions just for in case you don't know each other. Let's not spend too much time there because we only have about 45 minutes to be done with this. 40 minutes actually to be done with this. And I'd like to assign one element of scale to each table. So this is how we are going to do it. Scale has 5 letters. So let's start here. This table is selection. You're looking at selection. This table you're looking at charging. The third table, that's a table. That's not a table, sorry. The table at the back, you're looking at addressing problems. You guys are looking at learning. L. So you go to the set of questions that says learning. Leading by example. Excellent. So our doubly blessed table, you're looking at selection. Charging. You're looking at addressing problems. So you go to the part of the list of questions around addressing problems. You're looking at learning. Yeah. And that's it. Yeah. That's everyone. If you have a question, just call me. I will come. This is what I need to clarify. So the questions that are there, so under selection, for example, who is the target of your program, intervention, service, and why? That's for you to discuss within the group. What you need to put on the flip chart, the answers that we want is to present to the plenary. So there's a section under there. So what are the common challenges identified in the group for selecting the right enterprises for the intervention? Yeah. So you're answering the questions that are under to present to plenary. Yeah. Is that clear? Is that clear for everyone? Yeah. So the first 3 questions under selection, charging, addressing problems, learning, those are questions to discuss at the table. Then the last 3 questions, the ones that are under to present to plenary, those are the ones you put on the flip chart that you share back. Yeah? So for the facilitators, ensure that somebody is writing on the flip chart and you've identified who's going to share back to the group. If you have a question, just let me know. Clap for your person. Whatever you have not written, you will just read it from the paper. You're okay. You're okay. You're okay. So we are ready for action. Can we move this? Let's move the flip chart stand closer to the center. All right, if you can hear me, clap once. If you can hear me, clap twice. There are people who are not clapping, so they can't hear me. If you can hear me, clap 3 times. If you can hear me, clap for me. Okay, perfect. So we have, you introduce the, which element of scale you're talking about, and then share with us what you came up with. Yes?
Okay, I'm Amadou Sharifdin, but I have a little protest. I'm a litigant, so you can expect it. I think the first presentation, we volunteered and presented. So 2 minutes, that's not part of the time. Anyway, so our group was tasked with discussing the learning part of the skill, and then to present. So we have 2 minutes, so I'll just go straight to the points. So the first question was to come up with common indicators or data points that organizations are tracking in the group. We looked at it from 2 perspectives. First is the pre-intervention and the post-intervention stages. In pre-intervention, we are looking at revenue. What is the state of the enterprise in terms of revenue before the intervention and the post-intervention stage? We are going to look at that as well to be able to effectively measure whether there's an impact or not. Best way to measure whether you are making progress is through impact, not through outcomes. So having that baseline in terms of revenue, financial management system, how they track their records and all of that, for you to have an insight as to how they operate before you can even tailor whatever program you are going to give to them. So operational issues, still in the same vein, issues of governance and structure, which sector they operate in, and what kind of management structure they employ. So you are going to do an assessment to also find their knowledge base, what kind of skills and experiences they come to the program with. And then, what is this one? And of course, from the perspective of the ESO, you want to find out how they came to know about the program they are coming to enroll in, at least for you to know the effectiveness of your media campaign strategies and what have you. So in terms of post-intervention, as I did indicate, we are looking at the revenue growth, whether they have been able to create jobs is an issue of impact. If you engage them and they are expanding, obviously you expect that expansion comes with the creation of jobs. Improvement in knowledge and skills and how they apply it, first through an assessment after the program for you to assess whether knowledge has been impacted or not. And post-intervention, you would have to see how they are, how best they are utilizing whatever knowledge you impacted, right? 1 minute, so we have 1 minute more. Question 2. Okay, what are the organizations in the group doing with the data they collect? First, as I did indicate in the previous one, you are able to use that data to design your training curriculum, what further assessments are needed, post and pre. Of course, after intervention, you would want to use data to find out whether there's the need to further engage and which areas have gaps for you to work on. Of course, the data is going to guide you in telling impact stories. If you have good data, it tells you whether you are making progress or not, so you can report properly. For the aspect of the ESOs too, you are able to use that data for your reporting and to seek further funding to support your programs. Question 3. What are the common challenges the group faces in data collection? Willingness of participants in maintaining a good relationship after exiting a program. Most of them feel once they are done with the program, they have achieved their objectives. So they are no more willing to engage with you as they were engaging with you initially. So that is a challenge. Limited resources to tell the impact stories. Mostly when we are designing programs, we don't normally earmark resources for this. And this is a capacity issue. Most ESOs do not have it in mind to talk about the good practices and what have you. And it's an important area that needs to be looked at. And of course, challenge in having the funding to conduct monitoring as well. It's through monitoring that you can get the data. And most ESOs are challenged in that regard. So lack of expertise to design monitoring and evaluation frameworks is also there. Some do not have the needed expertise. Misinformation from clients. Of course, when you are assessing them, most of them will tell you they do this and this and this and that. But in most cases, when you are doing validations, it comes out that it's not the case. All right. Question 4. What are the organizations' tests put in place to improve the quality and utilization of the data collected? Design of monitoring and evaluation framework, issues of data storage, Most people, even after getting the data, tend to lose it, or it becomes how do I say it? It becomes interpolated in a way. All right. So issues of data storage and maintaining of data quality is there. Building the capacity of the staff to evaluate data. That is also a critical component. That has to do with internal capacity of the ESO. Staff having adequate knowledge to be able to evaluate the data that is coming and know how effective they are going to use it. I think in brief, that's what we have. No, that's it. Learning. I hope we've done well.
You have done very well.
All right.
Sorry, let's give them a hand. So which other group was doing learning? Another group doing learning? Learning. Okay, come over. Then I'd like you to focus on, so they've covered some really, really good points here. So add on those points. No need to repeat the points that they've already highlighted. Welcome. We can clap for you to encourage you as you come. Welcome. Is there another group doing learning? Learning. Oh, it's just those two groups. Perfect. Welcome. And you have 2 minutes. Who's talking?
Okay, good evening. My name is Kofi Sam Foster. The first question was about, what do you have there? So, you said we should add, right? Okay, so the first question was about how do we know that the programs that we are being run, which is being run, is effective? And we identified that we know that through the needs assessment and the impact assessment that the ESO or the organization is carrying out. Okay. So the common indicators that we identify or track in the group is you're looking at the impact indicators, we're looking at the satisfaction of the training program that has been run. We also look at the business formation and the environment enhancement, as well as the data, when it comes to the data that we gather during the tracking period. We look at the location where these people are actually applying for the program from. We're looking at the PR. In terms of PR, we're looking at whether they heard about the program from the online channel or they got it from the traditional channel, which is the radio, TV aspect. Looking at gender, age, and also enterprise information. That's the organization that they applied. What kind of information, what's the information of the organization that they are applying for that particular program. And also the understanding of the concepts that these organizations or the startups that applied for the program, how well did they actually understood the concepts for the program that we are running. That's how we also look at some of the when it comes to organization in the group. When it comes to data, the data that we collect, we're looking at how best we are going to improve. We collect this data to make sure that we are going to improve the interventions of the program that we are running, so that you know that, okay, if he's coming from A or B, he's coming from a particular region or a particular location, how do we make sure that the data gathered is going to help them to, is going to help us to improve on the intervention of the program that we are going to run the next time. The next thing is identifying. We collect this data to make sure we identify the trends, the gaps, and the opportunities that is available to us, and also what is going to be available to the organization that is going to apply later on. Lastly, we collect this data to make sure it helps us in forecasting for the next maybe 4 or 5 years in our action plans for the organization. Lastly, when it comes to what will the organization put in place to improve the quality and utilization of the data they collect? We are looking at the intentions for the data that we are gathering. We are looking at that. So when we are gathering the data, what is the intention for gathering the data? And also looking at the relevancy and the knowledge. When it comes to language, we are looking at the diversity of the data that we are gathering. How do we diversify the data when it comes to collection of the data? What kind of methods do we use? Are we just going to use the survey side, or we are going to do the face-to-face or the experts panel aspect? So these are some of the things that we do. And also, how do we improve the data? Okay, yes, the relevancy of the time for the data. We also look at how relevant the data, the time that we are collecting the data, how relevant is it to the program that we are going to run? How relevant it is to the program that, and particularly that time that we are collecting the data, how is it? In improvement of the usage of the data, we look at data analysis. How do we analyze the data that we've collected to make sure it's going to be improved upon in our next training programs we are going to run or something like that. So that is what we had. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's give them a clap. So that is your selection. Welcome, selection. So, and all the other groups that were doing selection, take note of the points that are being raised by this group so that you just come and add to them as opposed to repeating the same points. But yeah, well done.
All right, thank you so much. I must say I need all your ears here. Thank you so much. This particular group identify awareness of the intervention, lack of clarity on categorization of businesses, as well as lack of internal structures, inadequate data on the industry, readiness for coaching and innovation challenge are some of the key challenges that run across all the organizations that form this group. Ladies and gentlemen, I must tell you that the common challenges that we were able to identify are listed here and have been mentioned. Now, question 2, on assessment. Technical knowledge about the industry, availability, as well as innovation and problem identification are being some of the key areas that we intended to lay our assessment on. Ladies and gentlemen, research using innovative tools as well as viability of the business idea, skill set of the team members, expectation management involving industry expertise in the selection process. Now, you observe and you agree with me that this presentation has been somehow different. We are presenting a one-page presentation simply because we believe that it is not what you do, it's how you do it. This simple one-page presentation has been able to capture everything. Thank you so much. God bless you all.
Wow, okay. Very succinct. Thank you for that. So another group that did selection. Who would like to follow that? And which other group did selection? There's one group on this side that was doing selection. Clap for them, encourage them. Clap for them. Two of you can come. Actually, the whole group can come and give each other moral support. Well done, well done. Well done. Let me help you put it up.
This one, we are doing it to release tension. Okay, so the selection process, some of the challenges that we all agreed we have is that, first of all, lack of resource, or not lack, sorry, inadequate. So for instance, somebody said how they are located in a lot of very rural areas. They have a lot of ideas, but they don't have enough resources to execute. And then another thing is that even the ESOs ourselves, a lot of us are not investor ready. So how much more or how much less the businesses that we are supporting? So that's also a challenge. And then lack of capacity for, our capacity in terms of even our knowledge of the work we are doing, the opportunities out there, our preparedness, confidence, and all that. We need to build that capacity as well. And then burdensome, this one, the tax and regulatory environment. A lot of us, the kind of work we are doing is social in nature. We are plowing back and helping the communities. But when the taxes come, they don't recognize that it's all about, hey, give me, so, and sometimes it's painful. So we are really keen on looking at ways that ESOs especially can have more friendly tax. We are not saying we won't pay, we want to pay, but it should be more friendly and not discouraging. And then, this question, I've forgotten the question, but I know the answers. Examples of what? How to ensure we are targeting the right businesses. So we have to be very clear of our value proposition and target market. So we go and focus on them, and identifying the needs of the business, obviously doing the needs assessment ahead of, and not just designing something and say, all of you come and do this training. It has to be customized. And performing, okay, that's what I said. Then the last one, how to improve the selection. So adopting technology to reduce human intervention. So somebody gave an example of how for most of their processes, you don't even see a human being. You fill this form, it takes you here, it takes you there. So there is no room for corruption or frustration or anything. And using incentives to motivate and attract the people, the kind of people, like I, for instance, work with women. Some of us work with people in underserved communities, to get them off their farms and everything. First of all, they don't even understand what you want to give them. So you have to first attract them using some sort of incentive, sometimes TNT, item 13, and things like that, just to get them to come into the room. And then adopting convenient approaches to training. So I gave an example of some of the women we work with that sometimes even pay for the service, but do not turn up for programs because they are so busy, overwhelmed with work and family life already. So one of the things we are doing is that our online programs are self-paced, and it's pre-recorded, so you watch the video, a 10-minute video, you do the assignment, and it's over a long period of time, but once a week, so it's more flexible. And when we do it this way, people are still able to participate and get the knowledge they need without having to go and sit in the classroom for like a week, 3 weeks, and all. So it's a hybrid sort of thing, and it's working. So that's one of our solutions. Please clap for us.
That was amazing. Thank you. Thank you. So is there any other group that was doing selection? Selection? That's everyone. So we can go to addressing problems. Who was addressing problems? Come. And we are ready for you. Which other group was doing addressing problems so that they know they're next? They're here, okay. So you're next. Get ready, get ready.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Our group was tasked to discuss how our programs can meet the needs of our clients. So from our discussions, we came up with learning from previous programs. We realized that after we organize our programs, we do needs we do feedback. Yeah, so through our feedbacks, we can learn from our previous programs, and then through that we can address problems. Also, we came up with needs assessment. And needs assessment, we'll do that through research. We would conduct our surveys, market surveys, through the selection criteria. We can come up with our needs assessment. And then the third point was needs pitch. So instead of the normal pitches where you come to pitch your wonderful idea, you come to pitch the problems of your organization, and through that we can help address your problem. Organizing stakeholder forums also. Yeah, so this. So our group identified the needs, how we can become more needs based or needs focused. And these are some of the ways we can become more needs focused, which is through the modular approach. And the modular approach is by mapping out the particular model based on the specific needs of your client. And then number two, specialized trainings. You realize that after we do our needs assessments, we get to know the problems of each of our clients, and so we are able to organize special trainings to meet the needs of this particular problems. Then individual mentorship and coaching. Through individual mentorship and coaching, you can get a deeper sense of what they are going through, what they need, and through that we are able to solve their problems. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Addressing problems. Let's encourage him as he comes. Is there another group that was looking at addressing problems? It's just them, okay. So the next one we'll look at is charging. So if you are addressing charging, start preparing. You're next.
Hello, everyone. I'm Godwin Bodo. So, taking a look at the addressing problems, we think it's very important to notice we have to identify the magnitude of the problem. So the person can come to you if you don't really understand how the problem is, what is involved, how the gravity of the problem, you will not be able to offer maybe the appropriate solution to the client. And then they've said most of the things that we also talked about. So our second question, we were talking about how can you make your program or intervention service more need-based. So first of all, even needs-based means you have to conduct a needs assessment. That is, we are talking about you going about your survey, maybe your baseline survey, your questionnaires. You go to the site, you visit your clients, maybe the business. Maybe you go and look at the problems yourself. You look at it very critically, and maybe you know how to what. You know, doctors, you have to look at the client, take a very critical look. So you also have to go and take a very critical look at the business to offer a solution. So we are looking at the 3 things that you test in your organization to make your program or intervention more needs-based. And first of all is your monitoring evaluation. Monitoring evaluation for ESO is very important because that is how you measure your impact, the impact you are creating. So you have to check your monitoring evaluation. If your monitoring evaluation is very good, you'll be able to maybe at the end of the day identify the problems that you are facing for a particular program, and the next time when you're organizing such programs, you'll be able to come out with maybe innovative ways to solve that program. We also talk about testing the objectives of the program. So before you start the program, you need to come up with objectives, and you have to make sure these objectives are very, how do I say, realistic to achieve. And then the last one, we are talking about testing the capacity of staff. That means you have to invest in building the capacity of your staff, and then also, at the end of the day, you can invest in building capacity of your staff, but maybe at the end of the day, they don't learn it. So you have to test it. You have to put mechanism in place to test whether the training you are giving to your staff, is it really having an impact on them? So that is basically what we talk about. So here is the summary of what we did. Thank you.
Well done, well done. So we said, who's next? Charging. Who was doing charging? Welcome.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. So we are here to talk about charging. And first question was, how many organizations represented in the group charge? And we are a table of 8, and 5 out of us charge for our services and program. I know you are laughing because some of us see ourselves as social enterprises and we don't charge for our programs, but it's funny that majority of us on the table are HAPs and we do charge. It went into a breakage where we talked about interventions, services, and our programs, where some of us do charge for services, some charge for interventions, and some also charge for their programs. But in all, we put it together and say 5 out of the number do charge for the programs. Question 2 was, the barriers to introducing finance were identified. So we identified location, funding, target audience or group, and program presentation. So the location basically help us to determine the price that you are going to have for your program, intervention, or services, because someone located in the northern part of Ghana can't price the same program done by an organization based in the southern part of Ghana because of economic issues. We talked about funding, which had 2 phases. One is if you run program that is funded for so long, your audience or your target tend to believe that you are doing it for free. So when you decide to price some of the programs, you don't get participants to participate in your programs. The other side is lack of funding too is another problem when you are determining your price or pricing your programs. Then we went to your target audience or group. The pricing of programs, we always determine the group that we are going to organize the program for. So the price that someone, an aged person or someone who is not working for a program will pay is not the same price that a student or a group of students in school will pay. Then program presentation. How you present the program, how you package it, the packages that involve the program that you're organizing is another barrier that we determine, because some programs don't actually engage or present the program packages to their participants, letting them know the benefit that they are going to get from the program. Then we went to what strategies has the group identified for determining the price, the right price point. And we started with survey. When organizations on our table came out that when they are going to start a program, they do surveys, they do ask around potential participants how much they are willing and be able to pay. Some of them also look at their co-organization or colleagues who have organized programs of that sort in the past and use their price range to also determine their price. And we talked about operating costs. So the operational costs that involve in bringing out all the products or the programs that you do, the services that you do, you consider it into your pricing point. Then it's interesting enough that something that becomes a barrier is also a determinant here. We talked about location and target audience. So your location and target audience will help you determine, because where you are located, you know the kind of persons or the people in that community or area, and you can determine how much they will be willing to pay or be able to pay for your program. The last question was, what strategies has the group identified for improving compliance with fee and improving collection rate? And we started with commitment fee. We had Madam Abeta on that table, who is very experienced. She shared her experience about how sometimes you let the participant make some part payment of the full price, then it commit them into fully paying the rest of the price. And flexible payment plan. You can give them an installment plan where there will be a duration for them to pay it out. Then we had payment before certification. They will have to pay the full price of the program before they are certified or they are given certificates to that regard. And discount and subsidies. So you can put it on your flyer that the 10 first persons that will apply for the program will receive a discount or a subsidy of a certain percentage or an amount. And we had free trials. So these are free, let's say, duration that you can use or give to the participant to be part of the program. Then at the end of that duration, then they start paying for the main price. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Who else was doing charging? Charging? Charging, there you go. Was there another group doing charging? I think we're done with charging. No, I think that was it. The last group should be doing leading by example. How many did we have? Was it one group? It was one group. Was there another group doing leading by example? Okay, so get ready. Leading by example.
All right, good evening. So our group is a money group required to collect the money, right? So from our first question is how many organizations among us that is charging? So 3 out of the 7 members happens to charge a fee for their programs or some of their programs. Then the second question talks about challenges in putting up a fee. So one, we look at the economic conditions of our clients. So in Ghana, it seems to be everybody is hard. We don't have money. So that idea seems to cut across people's minds, especially when they are receiving services that they really don't think they have value for it. That's one. Second point is also the sociocultural mindset. The mindset of mentality. Once you are an SOE and then you happen to work with donor companies like, let's say, MasterCard or the others, the participants have the mindset that they've given you money. Why are you coming to charge us money again? So use that money to provide a service for us. They never know that there are more to those kind of funds. So that mindset runs through clients or participants as a challenge we encounter. So the third point says, how do we charge, I guess, strategies in identifying the right price. So in identifying the right price, we realize that first we need to identify the cost of the service. We need to know how much it's going to involve in providing this service to our target audience. This helps us to know how to share the price. And also, we also identify that the stage of the businesses of each of the clients. Some have the ability to pay. Some may not have the ability to pay. So we try to assess the stages of the business of our clients to enable who to levy in a proper manner and who not to. And we also talk about benchmarking, looking at industry, what they are charging around such a service, so that we charge a fair price. Then finally, the last point, we talk about what strategies has the group identified in improving compliance. So they've said all that we've identified, but just to retreat a little, we talk about first, quality of the service we provided. Very customized quality service needs to be presented to the clients. Two, we talk about payment plans. We don't want to force them to pay everything at a go. You try to make it in a bit so that they pay some little deposits. Then you spread it across the milestone. Probably if you get to stage 3, you pay this amount. If you get to stage 4, you pay this amount. We also talk about discounts tied to milestone. When you're able to attend 4 of the sessions, we give you 10% discount on the fees, just to motivate them to come. We finally also talk about the commitment fees. That's one of our colleagues shared that sometimes you don't necessarily need to take the money. You can ask them that if the fee is 100 cedis, you ask them to pay 200. At the end of the day, you give them 100 free back. So that's a way of showing commitment to the program. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So leading by example. Is there any other group that was doing leading by example? No. Yeah, so there should be one group. So, welcome.
Hi. So our team worked on leading by example, and we identified some SWOT analysis, and we asked that based on the analysis of the SWOT, how does this apply to organization? Please, I'm not doing this on behalf of GHN, so all of us. So we realized that some of the organizations had a strong organizational culture. They, in terms of how their facilities are run, how they welcome people who come to their facilities, how they reply to emails, all the strong culture they have it there. They also have skilled expertise in their organization. So they have top talents who have been recruited to perform all the various activities that are run by the organization. And then they also have infrastructure. So in terms of good Wi-Fi, ICT labs, computer technology that helps them in their day-to-day activities, they are good at that infrastructure. Then they also identified certain weaknesses, that they had high employee turnover. So one or two reasons why employees tend to leave the organizations, maybe because they are not able to really pay them well, and yes, and other things that. Then they also have lack of financial sustainability, in the sense that they don't have a constant flow of where revenue comes to for them to be able to keep up with the organization. So mostly we identified that the funds that come to them are just to support their project mainly, but for them to be able to also have that kind of money, little money or fund, to be able to run their infrastructure or the company, they don't have that. So that was some of the weaknesses that they also had. Then we looked at opportunities. So they said the reason why they are there is because they've realized that there's a high pool of young individuals or people who are looking for support in their businesses. So young people are coming to them all the time to say that I have this idea, so I want to come to you. So it's an opportunity for them that young people are coming to them for trainings and all these incubations and support. Then there's also a large number of funding organizations in the landscape. So from the various partners that comes to fund projects, they have this in the ecosystem. Then there's also government and other partners as well who give the support to them. And then they also looked at network supports like Ghana House Network and other digital and virtual platforms where they are able to showcase the visibility of their brands and then also be able to give them that limelight of what they do. Then we looked at the possible threat that these ESOs also face. Then we're looking at political interference. It's something that when the people who are in the governmental agencies are brought into power, there's a possibility that there may be a bit of interference because they were not the one who implemented certain act or any other, so there may have to be an interference, put my person there, and affect their work. Then we're also looking at government policies. So there's some policies that may not really go well with their vision. So it's a bit of a threat for them. Then we're looking at disputes. So somebody mentioned that from where he's coming from the upper sector of Ghana, there was a time where there was a dispute, so they had to even close down for some period of months, so they were not able to operate. And so it's also a threat because now the operational cost and all that also had effects on them. And then we're looking at images of other stakeholders who are supposed to be collaborators. So in the case of like, permit me, free space, in the space of say we have some banks or other organizations who are supposed to rather be giving this project to the ecosystem players, they are now having that done by themselves. So we're seeing some people like the key players who are now training SMEs and holding all these things. Meanwhile, they're supposed to give those projects to some of the ecosystem players here. So it's also a threat for them. And then pandemic and global crisis. So in the light of the COVID, any other maybe unforeseen circumstance that can be able to happen in the future, it's also a threat to them because they don't know how it's going to affect them in the, and of course COVID also brought to some being shut down and some had to stand on strong resilience to be able to operate till now. And then the steps that were identified to address the weaknesses. That's it? Okay, so we're looking at generating steady revenue. And so we encourage that startups pay, of course, I think most of our colleagues have mentioned that over and over. They should be encouraged to pay these events that's organized for their goodwill. And then there's also online visibility that we need to have that what the ecosystem is really doing to be able to push, we need to really push them to give them visibility. And we're looking at financial management, taxation and compliance as well. And then we also looked at corporate governance. Knowing the structures, having all the structures in place and yeah, being good. And then assessment. That's question 3. The steps identified to address weaknesses and mitigate threats identified in the group. So we looked at assessments. If you identify a threat or any weakness, you assess yourself first. You see the loopholes and all that you need to work on. So we realized that we need to learn from best practices. In this case, we encourage that we learn, relearn, and unlearn to be able to meet that. And then we also invite organizational experts in the various specialties to be able to teach us on all these things that are lacking. And of course, using the skill diagnosis tool to improve on the SWOT analysis. So, thank you.
Thank you. I think that was the last group. Is there another group that hasn't presented? I don't think so. Okay. There's no other group that hasn't presented. So, yeah, so that concludes our session for today. I just wanted to say a big thank you to everybody for your attention and your participation in the groups. Leading by example is actually like a whole workshop on its own, and it's the one that I'd actually recommend that the group considers doing next and spending a lot more time on, just on that leading by example. But at this stage, other than saying thank you, and I'm so excited for what's happening in the Ghanaian ecosystem. Your feedback was very demonstrative of where the ecosystem is, and you're asking the right questions, you're thinking about the right things, so I'm really excited for all of you. And at this stage, I will hand over to Mohammed,